Hello. 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 Oh, I forgot my light. Hold on. Let me get my light. There it is. Ugh. One of these days, I will come into one of these streams fully prepared to do the whole stream. But you know what? That day was not today. Hello. I hope you're doing well. I just did what I do before every single stream where I'm reading a book, and that is go to the Spark Notes for that book and remind myself what's going on, because it's been 2 weeks, maybe 3, since I've done a Pride and Prejudice stream, and your girl needed a recap. But there's a lot going on, so I'm very excited to get back into this. We have some drama going on between Elizabeth and Miss Collins, Mr. Collins, Charlotte Lucas. All these people are sort of getting in each other's business, so I'm excited to see what happens in these next few chapters of Pride and Prejudice. So, yes. Okay. No time like the present. Let's jump right in. So, we're going to try to read through chapter 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 today. But if we just do 6 through 9, I think that will be good as well. So let's see how far I can get. But anyway, without further ado, let's jump into it. So this is chapter 6 of Pride and Prejudice. Okay. one more sip before I start. Very nice. Okay. Mr. Collins' triumph in consequence of this invitation was complete. The power of displaying the grandeur of his patroness to his wondering visitors, and of letting them see her civility toward himself and his wife, was exactly what he had wished for, and that an opportunity of doing it should be given so soon was such an instance of Lady Catherine's condescension as he knew not how to admire enough. "I confess," said he, "that I should not have been at all surprised by her ladyship's asking us on Sunday to drink tea and spend the evening with the Rosings. I rather expected from my knowledge of her affability that it would happen, but who could have foreseen such an attention to this? Who could have imagined that we should receive an invitation to dine there, an invitation moreover including the whole party, so immediately after your arrival?" "I am the less surprised at what has happened," replied Sir William, "from that knowledge of what the manners of the great really are, which my situation in life has allowed me to acquire. About the court, such instances of elegant breeding are not uncommon. Scarcely anything was talked of the whole day or next morning, but their visit to Rosings, Mr. Collins was carefully instructing them in what they were to expect, that the sight of such rooms, so many servants, and so splendid a dinner might not wholly overpower them. When the ladies were separating for the toilet, he said to Elizabeth, "Do not make yourself uneasy, my dear cousin, about your apparel. Lady Catherine is far from requiring that elegance of dress in us which becomes herself and daughter. I would advise you merely to put on whatever of your clothes is superior to the rest. There is no occasion for anything more. Lady Catherine will not think the worse of you for being simply dressed. She likes to have the distinction of rank preserved." While they were dressing, he came 2 or 3 times to their different doors and recommended their being quick, as Lady Catherine very much objected to keep waiting for her dinner. Such formidable accounts of her ladyship and her manner of living quite frightened Maria Lucas, who had been little used to company, and she looked forward to her introduction at Rosings with as much apprehension as her father had done to his presentation at St. James's. As the weather was fine, they had a pleasant walk of about half a mile across the park. Every park has its beauty and its prospects, and Elizabeth saw much of it to be pleased with, though she could not be in such raptures as Mr. Collins expected the scene to inspire, and was slightly affected by his enumeration of the windows in front of the house, and his relation of what the glazing altogether had originally cost Sir Louis de Bow. I'm looking if there's something that I can use to hold these pages down, because I don't want to hold them the whole time. Use this little bookmark that my friend made me. There we go. When they ascended the steps to the hall, Maria's alarm was every moment increasing, and even Sir William did not look perfectly calm. Elizabeth's courage did not fail her. She had heard nothing of Lady Catherine that spoke her awful from any extraordinary talents or miraculous virtue, and the mere stateliness of money and rank she thought she could witness without trepidation. From the entrance hall, of which Mr. Collins pointed out, with a rapturous air, the fine proportion and finished ornaments, they followed the servants through the ante-chamber to the room where Lady Catherine, her daughter, and Mrs. Jenkinson were sitting. Her ladyship, with great condescension, arose to receive them, and as Mrs. Collins has settled it with her husband and the office of introduction should be hers, it was performed in a proper manner without any of those apologies and thanks which he would have thought necessary. In spite of having been at St. James's, Sir William was so completely awed by the grandeur surrounding him that he had but just courage enough to make a very low bow and take his seat without saying a word. And his daughter, frightened almost out of her senses, sat on the edge of her chair, not knowing which way to look. Elizabeth found herself quite equal to the scene, and could observe the three ladies before her composedly. Lady Catherine as a tall, large woman, with strong, marked features, which might once have been handsome. Her air was not conciliating, nor was her manner of receiving them, such as to make her visitors forget their inferior rank. She was not rendered formidable by silence, but whatever she said was spoken in so authoritative a tone as marked her self-importance and brought Mr. Wickham immediately to Elizabeth's mind. And from the observation of the day altogether, she believed Lady Catherine to be exactly what he had represented. When, after examining the mother, in whose countenance and deportment she soon found some resemblance to Mr. Darcy, she turned her eyes to the daughter, she could almost have joined in Maria's astonishment at her being so thin and so small. There was neither in figure nor face any likeness between the ladies. Miss de Bow was pale and sickly. Her features, though not plain, were insignificant, and she spoke very little, except in a low voice, to Mrs. Jenkinson, in whose appearance there was nothing remarkable, and who was entirely engaged in listening to what she said and placing a screen in the proper direction before her eyes. It's funny how that line meant such a different thing back then. Like a screen before her eyes, I imagine means like almost like a zoning out type of screen before her eyes, I can imagine. But now, like, it would obviously be like a phone or whatever, something to distract yourself with from a conversation. It's just interesting. The word screen. Okay. After sitting a few minutes, they were all sent to one of the windows to admire the view, Mr. Collins attending them to point out its beauties, and Lady Catherine kindly informing them that it was much better worth looking at in the summer. The dinner was exceedingly handsome, and there were all the servants and all the articles of plate which Mr. Collins had promised, and as he had likewise foretold, he took his seat at the bottom of the table, by her ladyship's desire, and looked as if he felt that life could furnish nothing greater. He carved and ate and praised with delighted alacrity, and every dish was commended first by him and then by Sir William, who was now enough recovered to echo whatever his son-in-law said, in a manner which Elizabeth wondered Lady Catherine could bear. But Lady Catherine seemed gratified by their excessive admiration, and gave most gracious smiles, especially when any dish on the table proved a novelty to them. The party did not supply much conversation. Elizabeth was ready to speak whenever there was an opening, but she was seated between Charlotte and Miss de Bow, the former of who were engaged in listening to Lady Catherine, and the latter said not a word to her all dinner time. Mrs. Jenkinson was chiefly employed in watching how little Miss de Bow ate, pressing her to try some other dish, and fearing she were indisposed. Maria thought speaking out of question, and the gentleman did nothing but eat and admire. When the ladies returned to the drawing room, there was little to be done but to hear Lady Catherine talk, which she did without any intermission till coffee came in, delivering her opinion on every subject in so decisive a manner. She proved that she was not used to have her judgment controverted. She inquired into Charlotte's domestic concerns, familiarity and minutely, and gave her a great deal of advice as to the management of them all, told her how everything ought to be regulated in so small a family as hers, and instructed her as to the care of her cows and her poultry. Elizabeth found that nothing was beneath the great lady's attention, which could furnish her with an occasion of dictating to others. In the intervals of her discourse with Mrs. Collins, she addressed a variety of questions to Maria and Elizabeth, but especially to the latter, of whose connections she knew the least, and who she observed to Mrs. Collins was a very genteel, pretty kind of girl. She asked her at different times how many sisters she had, whether they were older or younger than herself, whether any of them were likely to be married, and whether they were handsome, when they had been educated, what carriage her father kept, and what had been her mother's maiden name. Elizabeth felt all the impertinence of her questions, but answered them very composedly. Lady Catherine then observed, "Your father's estate is entailed on Mr. Collins, I think. For your sake," turning to Charlotte, "I am glad of it. But otherwise I see no occasion for entailing estates from the female line. It was not thought necessary in Sir Louis de Beau's family. Do you play and sing, Miss Bennet?" "A little." "Oh, then some time or other we shall be happy to hear you. Our instrument is a capital one, properly superior to— You shall try it one day. Do your sisters play and sing?" "One of them does." "Why did you not all learn? You ought all to have learned." "The Miss Webbs all play, and their father has not so good an income as yours. Do you draw?" "No, not at all." "What? None of you?" "Not one." "That is strange. But I suppose you had no opportunity. Your mother should have taken you to town every spring for the benefit of masters." "My mother would have no objection, but my father hates London." "Has your governess left you?" "We never had any governess." "No governess? How is that possible? 5 daughters brought up at home without a governess. I never heard of such a thing. Your mother must have been quite a slave to your education." Elizabeth could hardly help smiling as she assured her that that had not been the case. "Then who taught you? Who attended to you? Without a governess, you must have been neglected." "Compared with some families, I believe we were, but such of us as wished to learn never wanted the means. We were always encouraged to read, and had all the masters that were necessary. Those who chose to be idle certainly might." "I no doubt, but that is what a governess will prevent, and if I had known your mother— sorry, I lost my place. "If I had known, I should have advised her most strenuously to engage one. I always say that nothing is to be done in education without steady and regular instruction, and nobody but a governess can give it." It is wonderful how many families I have been the means of supplying in that way. I'm always glad to get a young person well placed out. 4 nieces of Miss Jenkinson are almost delightfully situated through my means, and I was but the other day that I recommended another young person who was merely accidentally mentioned to me, and the family are quite delighted with her. Mrs. Collins, did I tell you of Lady Metcalfe's, and the family are quite Metcalfe's calling yesterday to thank me? She finds Miss Pope a treasure. Lady Catherine, said she, you have given me a treasure. Are any of your younger sisters out, Miss Bennet? Yes, ma'am. All. All? What, all 5 at once? Very odd. And you, only the second. The younger ones out before the elder are married. Your young sisters must be very young? Yes, my youngest is not 16. Perhaps she is full young to be much in company. But really, ma'am, I think I would be very hard upon younger sisters, that they should not have their share of society and amusement because the older may not have the means or inclination to marry early. The last born has as good a right to the pleasures of youth as the first. And to be back on such a motive, I think it would not be very likely to promote sisterly affection or delicacy of mind. Upon my word, said her lordship, you give your opinion very decidedly for such a young person. Pray, what is your age? With 3 younger sisters grown up, replied Elizabeth, smiling. Your ladyship can hardly expect me to own it. Lady Catherine seemed quite astonished as not receiving a direct answer, and Elizabeth suspected herself to be the first creature who had ever dared to trifle with so much dignified impertinence. Lady Catherine seemed quite astonished as not receiving a direct answer. I read this. You cannot be more than 20, I am sure. Therefore, you need not conceal your age. I am not 21. When the gentlemen had joined them and tea was over, the card tables were placed. Lady Catherine, Sir William, and Mr. Collins sat down to quadrille, and as Miss de Bow chose to play at casino, the 2 girls had the honor of assisting Mrs. Jenkinson to make up her party. Their table was superlatively stupid. Scarcely a syllable was answered that did not relate to the game, except when Mrs. Jenkinson expressed her fears of Miss de Bow's being too hot or too cold, or having too much or too light. A great deal more passed to the other table. Lady Catherine was generally speaking, stating that mistakes of the 3 others, or relating some anecdote of herself. Mr. Collins was employed in agreeing to everything her ladyship said, thanking her for every fish he won, and apologizing if he thought he won too many. Sir William did not say much. He was storing his memory and anecdotes with notable names. When Lady Catherine and her daughter had played as long as they chose, the tables were broke up. The carriage was offered to Mrs. Collins, gracefully accepted, and immediately ordered. The party then gathered round the fire to hear Lady Catherine determine what weather they were to have on the morrow, and from these instructions they were summoned by the arrival of the coach, and with many speeches of thankfulness on Miss Collins' side, and as the bows of Sir William's, they departed. As soon as they had driven from the door, Elizabeth was called on by her cousin to give her opinion of all that she had seen at Rosings, which, for Charlotte's sake, made more favorable than it really was. But her commendation, though costing her some trouble, could by no means satisfy Mr. Collins, and he had very soon obliged to take her ladyship's praise into his own hands. Okay, that was chapter 6. What a moment between Lady Catherine and Elizabeth. I love these little tiffs when Elizabeth outsmarts everyone. Okay, chapter 7. Sir William stayed only a week at Hunsford, but his visit was long enough to convince him of his daughter's being most comfortably settled, and of her possessing with such a husband and such a neighbour as were not often met with. Sir William was with them. Mr. Collins devoted his mornings to driving him out in his gig and showing him the country, and when he went away, the whole family returned to their usual employments, and Elizabeth was thankful to find that they did not see more of her cousin by the alteration, for the chief of the time between breakfast and dinner was now passed by him either at work in the garden or in reading and writing, and looking out the window in his own book-room, which fronted the road. The room in which the ladies sat was backwards. Elizabeth at first had rather wondered that Charlotte Lucas would not prefer the dining parlour for common use. It was a better-sized room, and had a pleasanter aspect, but she soon saw that her friend had an excellent reason for what she did, for Mr. Collins would undoubtedly have been much less in his own apartment had they sat in one equally lively that she gave Charlotte credit for the arrangement. From the drawing-room, they could distinguish nothing in the lane, and were indebted to Mr. Collins for the knowledge of what carriages went along, and how often, especially Miss de Bow, drove by her phaeton, which he never failed coming to inform them of, though it happened almost every day. She not unfrequently stopped at the parsonage, and had a few minutes' conversation with Charlotte, who was scarcely ever prevailed on to get out. Very few days passed in which Mr. Collins did not walk to Rosings, and not many in which his wife did not think it necessary to go likewise, until Elizabeth recollected that there might be other family things to be disposed of. She could not understand the sacrifice of so many hours. Now and then they were honoured with a call from her ladyship, and nothing escaped her observation that was passing in the room during these visits. She examined into their employments, looked at their work, and advised them to do it differently, found fault in the arrangement of the furniture, detected the housemaid of negligence, and she accepted any refreshment, seemed to do it only for the sake of finding out that Mrs. Collins' joints of meat were too large for her family. Elizabeth soon perceived that though this great lady was not in the commission of her peace for the country, she was a most active magistrate in her own parish, the minutest concerns of which were carried to her by Mr. Collins, and whenever any of the cottagers were disposed to be quarrelsome, disoriented, or too poor, she sallied forth into the village to settle their differences, silence their complaints, and scold them into harmony and plenty. The entertainment of dining at Rosings was repeated about twice a week, and allowing for the loss of Sir William, and there being only one card table in the evening, every such entertainment was the counterpart of the first. Their other engagements were few, as the style of living in the neighbourhood in general was beyond the Collinses' reach. This, however, was no evil to Elizabeth, and upon the whole she spent her time comfortably enough. There were half hours of pleasant conversation with Charlotte, and the weather was so fine for that time of year that she often had great enjoyment out of doors. Her favourite walk, and where she frequently went while the others were calling on Lady Catherine, was along the open grove, which edged that side of the park where there was a nice sheltered path, which no one seemed to value but herself, where she felt beyond the reach of Lady Catherine's curiosity. In this quiet way, the first fortnight of her visit soon passed away. Easter was approaching, and the week preceding it was to bring an addition to the family at Rosings, which in so small a circle must be important. Elizabeth had heard soon after her arrival that Mrs. Darcy was expected there in the course of a few weeks, and Mr. Darcy, excuse me, and though there were not many of her acquaintance from whom she did not prefer, his coming would furnish the one comparatively new to look at the Rosing parties, and she might be amused in seeing how hopeless Miss Bingley's designs on him were, by his behaviour of his cousin, for whom he was evidently destined to Lady Catherine, who talked of his coming with the greatest satisfaction, spoke to him in terms of the highest admiration, and seemed almost angry to find that he had already been frequently seen by Miss Lucas and herself. His arrival was soon known to the parsonage, for Mr. Collins was walking the whole morning within view of the lodges opening to Hunsford Lane, in order to have the earliest assurance of it, and after making his bow as the carriage turned into the park, hurried home with great intelligence. On the following morning he hastened the Rosings to pay his respects. There were 2 nephews of Lady Catherine to require them, for Mr. Darcy had brought with him a Colonel Fitzwater, the youngest son of his uncle, Lord, and to the great surprise of all the party, when Mr. Collins returned, the gentleman accompanied him. Charlotte had seen them from her husband's room, crossing the road, and immediately returning to the other, told the girls what an honor they might expect, adding, "I may thank you, Eliza, for this piece of civility. Mr. Darcy would never have come so soon to wait upon me." Elizabeth had scarcely time to disclaim all right to the compliment before their approach was announced by the door-bell, and shortly after the 3 gentlemen entered the room. Colonel Fitzwater, who led the way, was about 30, not handsome, but in person and addresses most truly the gentleman. Mr. Darcy looked just as he had been used to look in Hertfordshire, paid his compliments with the usual reserve to Mrs. Collins, and whatever might be his feelings toward her friend, met her with every appearance of composure. Elizabeth merely curtsied him, without saying a word. Colonel Fitzwater entered into conversation directly with the readiness and ease of a well-bred man, and talked very pleasantly. But his cousin, after having addressed a slight observation on the house and garden to Mrs. Collins, sat for some time without speaking to anybody. At length, however, his civility was so far awakened as to inquire of Elizabeth's after the health of her family. She answered him in the usual way, and after a moment's pause, added, "My eldest sister has been in town these 3 months. Have you never happened to see her there?" She was perfectly sensible that he never had, but he wished to see whether he could betray any consciousness of what had passed between the Bingleys and Jane, and she thought he looked a little confused, as he answered that he had never been so fortunate as to meet Miss Bennet. The subject was pursued no further, and the gentleman soon afterwards went away. All right, that was chapter 7. Okay. All right. How do you like the gulping sounds? can't help, my mic is so good. Okay. I'll be ready for chapter 8. This is another short one, 3 pages. Okay, chapter 8. Colonel Fitzwater's manners were much admired at the parsonage, and the ladies all felt that he must add considerably to the pleasure of their engagements at Rosings. It was some days, however, before they received any invitation thither, for while there were visitors in their house, they could not be necessary, and it was not till until Easter Day, almost a week after the gentleman's arrival, that they were honored by such an attention that they were merely asked on leaving church to come there in the evening. For the last week they had seen very little of either Lady Catherine or her daughter. Colonel Fitzwater had called to the parsonage more than once during the time, but Mr. Darcy they had only seen at church. The invitation was accepted, of course, and at a proper hour they joined the party in Lady Catherine's drawing-room. Her ladyship received them civilly, but it was plain that their company was by no means so acceptable as when she could get nobody else, and she was, in fact, almost engrossed by her nephews, speaking to them, especially to Darcy, far more than to any other person in the room. Colonel Fitzwater seemed really glad to see them. Anything was a welcome relief to him at Rosings, and Mrs. Collins' pretty friend had moreover caught his fancy very much. He was now seated himself by her, and talked so agreeably of Kent and Hertfordshire, and travelling and staying at home, of new books and music, that Elizabeth had never been half so entertained in that room before. And they conversed with so much spirit and flow as to draw the attention of Lady Catherine herself, as well as of Mr. Darcy. His eyes had been soon and repeatedly turned towards them with a look of curiosity, and that her ladyship soon, after a while, shared the feeling, was more openly acknowledged, for she did not scruple to call out, "What's that you're saying? Fitzwilliam? What are you talking of? What are you telling Miss Bennet? Let me hear what it is." "We are speaking of music, madame," said he, who was no longer able to avoid a reply. "Of music? Then, pray speak aloud. It is of all subjects my delight. I must have my share in the conversation if you are speaking of music. There are few people in England, I suppose, who have more true enjoyment of music than myself, or a better natural taste. If I had ever learnt, I should have been a great proficient. And so would Anne, if her health had allowed her to apply. I am confident that she would have performed delightfully. How does Georgiana get on, Darcy?" Mr. Darcy spoke with affectionate praise of her sister's proficiency. "I'm very glad to hear a good account of her," said Lady Catherine, "and pray tell her from me that she cannot expect to excel if she does not practice a great deal." "I assure you, madam," he replied, "that she does not need such advice. She practices very constantly." "So much the better. It cannot be done too much, and when I next write to her, I shall charge her not to neglect it on any account. I often tell young ladies that no excellence in music is to be acquired without constant practice. I have told Miss Bennet several times that she will never play really well unless she practices more, and though Mrs. Collins has no instrument, she is very welcome, and I have often told her to come to Rosings every day and play on the pianoforte in Mrs. Jenkinson's room. She would be in nobody's way, you know, in that part of the house." Mr. Darcy looked a little ashamed of his aunt's ill-breeding, and made no answer. When coffee was over, Colonel Fitzwater reminded Elizabeth of having promised to play to him and she sat down directly to the instrument. He drew a chair near her. Lady Catherine listened to half a song, and then talked, as before, to her other nephew, till the latter walked away from her, and moving with his usual deliberation toward the pianoforte, stationed himself so as to command a full view of the fair performer's countenance. Elizabeth saw what he was doing, and, in the first convenient pause, turned to him with an arch smile, and said, "You mean to frighten me, Mr. Darcy, by coming in with all this state to hear me? But I will not be alarmed, though your sister does play well. There is a stubbornness about me that never can bear to be frightened at the will of others." Yes, Elizabeth. Oh my God. What a good line. "My courage always rises with every attempt to intimidate me." "I shall say that you are mistaken," he replied, "because you could not really believe me to entertain any design of alarming you, and I have had the pleasure of your acquaintance long enough to know that you find great enjoyment in occasionally professing opinions, which in fact are not your own." Elizabeth laughed heartily at this picture of herself, and said to Colonel Fitzwater, "Your cousin will give you a very pretty notion of me, and teach you not to believe a word I say. I am particularly unlucky in meeting with a person so well able to expose my real character, in a part of the world where I had hoped to pass myself off with some degree of credit. Indeed, Mr. Darcy, it is very egregious of you to mention all that you knew to my disadvantage in Hertfordshire, and, give me leave to say, very impolitic too, for it is provoking me to retaliate, and such things may come out, and will shock your relations to hear." "I am not afraid of you," he said, smilingly. "Pray, let me hear what you have to accuse him of," cried Colonel Fitzwater. "I should like to know how he behaves among strangers." "You shall hear then, but prepare yourself for something very dreadful. The first time of my ever seeing him in Hertfordshire, you must know, was at a ball. And at this ball, what do you think he did? He danced only 4 dances. I am so sorry to pain you, but so it was. He danced only 4 dances, though gentlemen were scarce, and to my certain knowledge, more than one young lady was sitting down in want of a partner. Mr. Darcy, you cannot deny the fact. I had not at that time the honor of knowing any lady in the assembly beyond my own party. True, and nobody can ever be introduced in a ballroom." Oh my God, iconic. "Well, Colonel Fitzwater, what do I play next? My fingers wait at your orders." "Perhaps," said Darcy, "I should have judged you better had I sought an introduction, but I am ill qualified to recommend myself to strangers." "Shall we ask your cousin the reason of this?" said Elizabeth, still addressing Colonel Fitzwater. "Shall we ask him why a man of sense and education, and who has lived in the world, is ill qualified to recommend himself to strangers?" "I can answer your question," said Fitzwilliam, without applying to him. I think I keep saying Fitzwater. It's Fitzwilliam. "It is because he will not give himself the trouble. I certainly have not the talent which some people possess," said Darcy, "of conversing easily with those I have never met before. I cannot catch their tone of conversation, or appear interested in their concerns, as I often see done." "My fingers," said Elizabeth, "do not move over this instrument in the masterly manner which I see so many women's do. They have not the same force or rapidity and do not produce the same expressions. But then I have always supposed it to be my own fault, because I could not take the trouble of practicing. It is not that I do not believe my fingers as capable as any other woman's or superior education, of superior execution. Darcy smiled and said, "You are perfectly right. You have employed your time much better. No one admitted of the privilege of hearing you can think anything wanting. We neither of us perform to strangers." Here they were interrupted by Lady Catherine, who called out to know what they were talking of. Elizabeth immediately began playing again. Lady Catherine approached and, after listening for a few minutes, said to Darcy, "Miss Bennet would not play at all amiss. If she practiced more, she could have had the advantage of a London master. She has very good notion of fingering, though her taste is not equal to Anne's. Anne would have been a delightful performer, and her health, had her health allowed her to learn." Elizabeth looked at Darcy to see how cordially he assented to his cousin's praise. But neither at that moment nor at any other could she discern any symptom of love. And from the whole of his behavior to Miss de Bow, she derived this comfort from Miss Bingley, that he might have just as likely to marry her had she been his relation. Lady Catherine continued her remarks. Wait, I want to reread that. Oh, interesting. Okay. Lady Catherine continued her remarks on Elizabeth's performance, mixing with them many instructions on execution and taste. Elizabeth received them with all the forbearance of civility, and at the request of the gentleman remained at the instrument till her ladyship's carriage was ready to take them all home. Oh, okay, we're starting an ad break. I think I'm going to take this time to take a quick break, but I will be right back in 2 minutes. I will see you very soon. Hello, hello. I'm back from my break. What did I do with my break, you may ask? I sat like this, in my chair, checked my email, did some banking, and I'm back for 2 more chapters of Pride and Prejudice. So let's get into it. Chapter 9. Elizabeth was sitting by herself the next morning and writing to Jane while Mrs. Collins and Maria had gone on business into the village when she was startled by a ringing at the door, the certain signal of a visitor. As she had heard no carriage, she thought it was not unlikely to be Lady Catherine, and under that apprehension was putting away her half-finished letter that she might escape all impertinent questions, when the door opened, and to her very great surprise, Mr. Darcy, and Mr. Darcy only, entered the room. He seemed astonished, too, on finding her alone, and apologized for his intrusion by letting her know that he had understood all the ladies to be within. Then they sat down, and when her enquiries after Rosings were made, seemed in danger of sinking into total silence. It was absolutely necessary, therefore, to think of something, and in this emergence recollecting when she had seen him last in Hertfordshire, and feeling so curious to know what he would say on the subject of their hasty departure, she observed, "How very suddenly you all quitted Netherfield last November, Mr. Darcy. It must have been a most agreeable surprise to Mr. Bingley to see you all after him so soon, for, if I recollect right, he went but the day before. He and his sisters were well, I suppose, when you left London." "Perfectly so, I thank you." Okay. She found that she was to receive no other answer, and after a short pause added, "I think I have understood that Mr. Bingley has not much idea of ever returning to Netherfield again. I've never heard him say so, but it is probable that he may spend very little of his time there in the future. He has many friends, but he is at a time of life when friends and engagements are continually increasing. If he means to be but little at Netherfield, it would be better for the neighborhood that he should give up the place entirely. And then we might possibly get a settled family there. But perhaps Mr. Bingley did not take the house so much for the convenience of the neighborhood as for his own, and we must expect him to keep or quit it on the same principle." "I should not be surprised," said Darcy, "if he were to give it up for as any eligible purchase offers." Elizabeth made no answer. She was afraid of talking longer of his friend, and, having nothing else to say, was now determined to leave the trouble of finding a subject to him. He took the hint, and soon began with, "This seems a very comfortable house. Lady Catherine, I believe, did a great deal to it when Mr. Collins first came to Hunsford." "I believe she did, and I am sure she could not have bestowed her kindness on a more grateful object. Mr. Collins appears very fortunate in his choice of a wife." "Yes, indeed. His friends may well rejoice in his having met with one of a very few sensible women who would have accepted him, or have made him happy if they had. My friend has an excellent understanding, though I am not certain that I consider her marrying Mr. Collins as the wisest thing she ever did. She seems perfectly happy, however, and in a prudential right, it is certainly a very good match for her. It must be very agreeable to her to be settled within so easy a distance of her own family and friends." "An easy distance, do you call it?" "It is. Oh, my grandparents are calling me. I'm going to answer this." Hola, hermano. I turned off my mic for a second because my grandparents called me, but I just hung up with them. Um, yes, that was my grandparents on the phone. We are going to a concert tomorrow. We're going to my cousin's a cappella concert tomorrow, and they got me a ticket, and they were letting me know where it was going on. Cool. What was the concert? What kind of concert was it? Was it fun? I'm seeing the Beths on Sunday, and I'm so excited. I got into the Beths, like, I don't know, just about a year ago. And yeah, I jumped on that train real fast. They're so good. Trivium? Was it a mosh pit sort of situation? I imagine that would get you sore and beat up. I I don't know if you know the Wonder Years, but they're like heavy rock bands based like where I'm from, and hell yeah, dude, that's so fun. Um and I've been to two of their concerts now. And the first one, like, I knew there was going to be moshing, but I guess I just didn't know what I was in for with the whole experience. Like, one thing that I didn't realize, and it was fun. I had a great time, so much that I went back and did it again. So, like, it was great. But I just wasn't expecting that, like, it literally doesn't matter who you go with. You will be separated from that person for the whole night because the moshing and the dancing, like, it just separates you from whoever you're with. Like I was saying, the second time I went to that concert, I was like, well, it was great seeing you guys. I'll see you at the end of the show. Because I was like, before it started, I was just like, okay, I understand how this works now. Also, like, I wasn't expecting, like, the crowd surfing is great. I think it's just sometimes I wish that it was toned down a tiny bit, although I know that's the whole culture, like, it's the whole point. But, like, I kept getting, like, knees to the face or knees to the back of the head. And I'm like, do we all have to crowd surf everyone? Yes, everyone is pushing and pulling. And that is what we're here for. That is the joy of the mosh. But, yeah, it was just crazy the first time and crazy the second time, but the second time I was a lot more prepared for it. Also, you have to, I'm sure you know this, but you have to wear shoes that you don't care about at all. Like shoes that you just don't mind getting destroyed because you're just gonna get jumped on, and like it's just silly. Jumping on stage and stage diving. Were people doing that? That's crazy town. Damn. Eldred, you go hard. I love that for you. Okay, gotcha. That's so fun. And you had your boots, so that's good. Yeah, I feel like you should wear like a steel-toed boot to a show, to like a heavy metal show. But yeah, well, I'm glad that you had a great time. Hell yeah. The Beths is like alt rock, but they're pretty soft as a band, so I'm very excited to see them this Sunday and see an a cappella show on Friday. Shall be very nice. Well, Macabro, give me your high-low kudos in the chat. And if you don't know what that is, if I haven't asked you already, the high is one good thing that happened today, a high point of your day. A low is obviously a low of your day, something that bothered you, maybe a low point in general. And then kudos, give kudos to one person from your day. Appreciate or thank one person from your day. I'll give mine real quick, and then I shall get back to book. You gone back to her, and I'll go back to book. My high was going on a run this morning. I did like a paced timed run, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. My low was I just feel like the work is, there's just so much to be done all the time. I have just an overflowing list of things to do, but I feel like committed to certain projects and obviously work and like this that take away time from all the things that need to be done. And I just wish I could clone myself and get it all done. And kudos to my friend Bless, who is staying with me right now. He's been staying with us for the past like week, and he'll be here a little bit longer. But I was able to see him this morning for a bit, and it was lovely chatting with him before my run. And when I came home, he had left a little note for me on the breakfast table. It was really cute. So I love Bless. The low was resting. I'm beat and did nothing all day. Damn. Fair, but like worth it, but like fair. Hi. Talking to a special someone. Ooh, a special someone. Very exciting. Kudos to your friends that went with you to the concert. Hell yeah, I love that for you. Let's go, Macabro. Okay, back to book. Macabro, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Okay. An easy distance? Do you call it? It is nearly 50 miles. And what is 50 miles of good road? Little more than half a day's journey. Yes, I call it a very easy distance. I should have never considered the distance as one of the advantages of the match, cried Elizabeth. I should never have said Mrs. Collins was settled near her family. It is proof of your own attachment to Hertfordshire. Anything beyond the first neighborhood of Longbourn, I'd suppose, would appear far. As he spoke. Thanks for... Wow, that's so pretty. Thanks for the bits or whatever, Macabro. Aw, Macabro. Hermano. Okay. Macabro, I'm going to start texting you in Spanish just to practice. Voy a textear. No. Voy a... I'm going... Yeah. Voy a textear. No. Textearte. I'm going to text you. Voy a textearte. Mensajar. Mensajar en español. Okay. Voy a mensajar en español todos los días para practicar. ¿Eh? ¿Qué sabes? ¿Qué sabes esto? All right. Yay. Bueno. All right. It is proof. Oh, I read this. As he spoke, there was a sort of smile which Elizabeth fancied she understood. He must be supporting her to be thinking of Jane and Netherfield, and she blushed as she answered, I do not mean to say that a woman may not be settled too near her family. The far and the near must be relative and depend on many varying circumstances. Where there is fortune to make the expense of traveling unimportant, distance becomes no evil. But that is not the case here. Mr. and Mrs. Collins have a comfortable income, but not so much as one will allow of frequent journeys. And I am persuaded my friend would not call herself near her family under less than half the present distance. Mr. Darcy drew his chair a little toward her and said, You cannot have a right to such very strong local attachment. You cannot have been always at Longbourn. Elizabeth looked surprised. The gentleman experienced some change of feeling. He drew back his chair, took a newspaper from the table, and, glancing over it, said in a colder voice, Are you pleased with Kent? A short dialogue on the subject of the country ensued, on either side calm and concise, and soon put an end to the entrance of Charlotte and her sister, just returned from their walk. The tete-a-tete surprised them. Mr. Darcy related the mistake which had occasioned his intruding on Miss Bennet, and after sitting a few minutes longer without saying much to anyone, went away. What can be the meaning of this? Said Charlotte as soon as he was gone. My dear Eliza, he must be in love with you, or he would never have called on us in this familiar way. But when Elizabeth told of his silence, it did not seem very likely, even to Charlotte's wishes, to be the case. And after various conjectures, they could at last only suppose his visit to proceed from the difficulty of finding anything to do, which was more probable from the time of year. All field sports were over. Within doors there was Lady Catherine, books, and a billiard table, but gentlemen cannot always be within doors, and in the nearness of the parsonage, or the pleasantness of the walk to it, or of the people who lived in it, the two cousins found a temptation from this period of walking thither almost every day. They called at various times of the morning, sometimes separately, sometimes together, and now and then accompanied by their aunt. It was plain to them all the Colonel Fitzwilliam came because he had pleasure in their society, a persuasion which, of course, recommended him still more, and Elizabeth was reminded by her own satisfaction in being with him, as well as by his evident admiration of her, from her former favourite George Wickham. And though, in comparing them, she saw there was less captivating softness in Colonel Fitzwater's manners, She believed he might have the best informed mind. But why Mr. Darcy came so often to the parsonage, it was more difficult to understand. It could not have been for society, for he frequently sat there 10 minutes together without opening his lips, and when he did speak, it seemed the effect of necessary rather than of choice, a sacrifice of propriety, not a pleasure to him. He seldom appeared really animated. Mrs. Collins knew not what to make of him. Colonel Fitzwater's occasional laughing at his stupidity proved that he was generally different, which her own knowledge of him could not have told her, and she would have liked to believe this change as an effect of love. And the objection of that love, her friend Eliza, she set herself seriously to work to find out. She watched him, whatever they were at Rosings, and whenever they came to Hunsford, but without much success. He certainly looked at her friend a great deal, but the expression of that look was disputable. In an earnest, steadfast gaze, she was often the expression of that gaze. But she often doubted whether there was much admiration in it, and sometimes it seemed nothing but absence of mind. She had once or twice suggested to Elizabeth the possibility of being partial to her, but Elizabeth had always laughed at the idea, and Miss Collins did not think it right to press the subject. From the danger of raising expectations, which might only end in disappointment, for in her opinion it admitted not of a doubt that all her friends' dislike would vanish if she could not suppose him to be in her power. In her kind schemes for Elizabeth, she sometimes planned her marrying Colonel Fitzwilliam. He was beyond comparison the pleasantest man. He certainly admired her, and his situation in life was most eligible. But to counterbalance these advantages, Mr. Darcy had considerable patronage in the church, and his cousin could have none at all. Okay. Chapter 10, about 3-ish more pages, and then we are done for the night. Chapter 10. More than once did Elizabeth, in her ramble within the park, unexpectedly meet Mr. Darcy. She felt all the perverseness of the mischance that should bring him where no one else had brought, and to prevent it ever happening again, took care to inform him at first that it was a favorite haunt of hers. How it could occur a second time, therefore, was very odd. Yet it did, and even a third. It seemed like willful ill nature or a voluntary penance, for on these occasions it did not merely for a few formal enquiries and an awkward pause and then away, and he actually thought it necessary to turn back and walk with her. He never said a great deal, nor did she give herself the trouble of talking or listening much, but it struck her, in the course of their third rencontre, that he was asking some odd, unconnected questions about her pleasure in being at Hunsford, her love of solitary walks, and her opinion of Mr. and Mrs. Collins' happiness. That in speaking of Rosings and her not perfectly understanding the house, he seemed to expect that whenever she came into Kent again, she would be staying there too. His words seemed to imply it. Could he have Colonel Fitzwilliam in his own thoughts? She supposed, if he meant anything, he must mean an allusion to what might arise in that quarter. It distressed her a little, and she was quite glad to find herself at the gate of the Pales opposite the parsonage. She was engaged one day as she walked in re-pursuing Jane's last letter, and dwelling on some passages which proved that Jane had not written in spirits when, instead of being again surprised by Mr. Darcy, she saw on looking up that Colonel Fitzwater was meeting her. Putting away the letter immediately and forcing a smile, she said, "I did not know before that you walked this way." "I have been making the tour of the park," he replied, "as I generally do every year, and I intend to close it with a call at the parsonage. Are you going much further?" "No, I should have turned in a moment." And accordingly she did turn, and they walked toward the parsonage together. "Do you certainly leave Kent on Saturday?" said she. "Yes, if Darcy does not put it off again, but I am at his disposal. He arranges the businesses just as he pleases." "And if not able to please himself in the arrangement, he has at least great pleasure in the power of choice. I did not know anybody who seems to enjoy the power of doing what he likes more than Mr. Darcy." "He likes to have his own way very well," replied Colonel Fitzwilliam, "but so we all do. It is only that he has better means of having it than many others, because he is rich, and many others are poor. I speak freely. A younger son, must have inured to self-denial and dependence. In my opinion, the younger son of an earl can know very little of either. Now seriously, what have you ever known of self-denial and dependence? What have you been preventing by want of money from going wherever you choose, or procuring anything you had a fancy for? These are home questions, and perhaps I cannot say I have experienced many hardships of that nature, but in matters of great weight I may suffer from the want of money. Younger sons cannot marry where they like, unless they are like women of fortune, which I think they very often do. Our habits of expense make us too dependent, and there are not many of my rank in life who can afford to marry without some attention to money." "Is this," thought Elizabeth, "meant for me?" And she colored the idea, but converting herself, said in a lively tone, "And pray, what is the usual price of an earl's younger son? Unless the elder brother is very sickly, I suppose you will not ask above 50,000 pounds. He answered her in the same style, and the subject dropped. To interrupt a silence which might make him fancy her affected with what had passed, she soon afterwards said, "I imagine your cousin brought you down with him chiefly for the sake of having somebody at his disposal. I wonder he does not marry to secure a lasting convenience of that kind. But perhaps his sister does as well for the present, and as she is under his sole care, he may do what he likes with her." "No," said Colonel Fitzwilliam. "That is an advantage which he must divide with me. I am joined with him in the guardianship of Miss Darcy." "Are you indeed? And pray, what sort of guardians do you make? Does your charge give you very much trouble? Young ladies of her age are sometimes a little difficult to manage, and if she has to say she has the true Darcy spirit, she may like to have it her own way." As she spoke, she observed him looking at her earnestly, and the manner in which he immediately asked her why she supposed Miss Darcy liked to give them any uneasiness convinced her that she had somehow or other got pretty near the truth. She directly replied, "You need not be frightened. I never heard any harm of her, and I dare say she is one of the most tractable creatures in the world. She is a very great favorite with some ladies of my acquaintance, Miss Hurst and Miss Bingley. I think I have heard you say that you know them." "I know them a little. Their brother is a pleasant gentleman-like man. He is a great friend of Darcy's." "Oh, yes," said Elizabeth dryly. "Mr. Darcy is uncommonly kind to Mr. Bingley, and takes a prodigious deal of care of him." "Care of him?" "Yes, I really believe Darcy does take care of him in those points where he most wants care. From something that he told me in our journey hither, I have reason to think Bingley very much indebted to him, but I ought to beg his pardon, for I have no right to suppose that Bingley was the person meant. It was all conjecture." "What is it you mean?" "It is a circumstance which Darcy, of course, would not wish to be generally known, because if it were to get round to the lady's family, it would be an unpleasant thing. You may depend upon my not mentioning it. And remember that I have not much reason of supporting it to be Bingley. What he told me was merely this, that he congratulated himself on having lately saved a friend from the inconvenience of a most imprudent marriage, but without mentioning names or any other particulars. I am only suspected it to be Bingley from believing him the kind of young man to get into a scrape of that sort, and from knowing them to have been together the whole of last summer. Did Mr. Darcy give you his reasons for the interference?" "I understood that there was some very strong objections from the lady." "And what arts did he use to separate them?" "He did not talk to me of his own arts," said Fitzwilliam, smiling. "He only told me what I have now told you." Elizabeth made no answer, and walked on, her heart swelling with indignation. And watching her a little, Fitzwilliam asked why she was so thoughtful. "I am thinking of what you have been telling me," she said. "Your cousin's conduct does not suit my feelings. Why was he to be the judge?" "You are rather disposed to call his interference officious?" "I do not see what right Mr. Darcy had to decide on the propriety of his friend's inclination, or why, upon his own judgment alone, he was so determined and direct in the manner that friend was to be happy. But," she continued, recollecting herself, "as we know none of the particulars, it is not fair to condemn him. It is not to be supported that there was much affection in the case." "That is not an unnatural surmise," said Fitzwilliam, "but it is lessening the honor of my cousin's triumph very sadly." This was spoken jestingly, but it appeared to her so just a picture of Mr. Darcy that she would not trust herself with an answer, and therefore, abruptly changing the conversation, talked on indifferent matters till they reached the parsonage. There, shut into her own room, so soon as their visitor left them, she could think without interruption of all that she had heard. It was not to be supposed that any other people could be meant that those with whom she was connected. There could not exist in the world two men over whom Mr. Darcy could have such boundless influence. That he had been concerned in the measures taken to separate Mr. Bingley and Jane, she had never doubted, but she was always attributed to Mr. Bingley and the principal design and arrangement of them. If his own vanity, however, did not mislead him, he was the cause. His pride and caprice were the cause of all that Jane has suffered, and still continues to suffer. He had ruined for a while every hope of happiness for the most affectionate, generous heart in the world, and no one could say how lasting an evil he might have inflicted. "There are some very strong objections against the lady," were Colonel Fitzwilliam's words, and these strong objections probably were her having one uncle who was a country attorney and another who was in business in London. "To Jane herself," she exclaimed, "there could be no possibility of objection. All loneliness and goodness as she is, her understanding excellent, her mind improved, and her manners captivating. Neither could anything be urged against my father, who, through with the same peculiarities, his abilities, which Mr. Darcy himself need not disdain, and respectably, which he will probably never reach. When she thought of her mother, indeed, her confidence gave way a little, She would not allow that any objections there had maternal weight with Mr. Darcy, whose pride, she was convinced, would receive a deeper wound from the want of importance of his friends' connections than from their want of sense. And she was quite decided, at last, that he had been partly governed by the worst kind of pride, and partly from the wish of retaining Mr. Bingley for his sister. The agitation and tears which the subject occasioned brought on a headache, and it grew so much worse toward evening that, added to her unwillingness to see Mr. Darcy, it determined her not to attend her cousins at Rosings, where they were engaged to drink tea. Mrs. Collins, seeing that she was really unwell, did not press her to go, and as much as possible prevented her husband from pressing her. But Mr. Collins could not conceal his apprehension of Lady Catherine's being rather displeased by her staying at home. Wow. Okay, that was chapter 10. So we have some definite development in the relationship between Darcy and Elizabeth, and it's not looking very well right now, clearly. So I'm very curious to see what will happen in the next few chapters regarding all of that. So yeah, very exciting. Thank you, Macabro, for watching. Thank you, Neff, for lurking. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I will be back probably tomorrow morning to do a writing stream. So I will see you then. Have a good night. Buenas noches. And yeah, I'll see you tomorrow morning. Bye.